folks, I got to be honest with you. I did not think we would be here right now on this Thursday. Boston Celtics take game 2. They were down 17. They were down 10 points at halftime. Come all the way back against Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Win that game 114-107. Boston heads to Brooklyn firmly in the driver's seat of this opening round matchup. Evan Valenti here. Adam Kaufman off for this week. We'll get into that in a second. But want to welcome on for the first time, good friend of mine, my guy, Brian Barrett, WEEI. Barrett, we go all the way back, I think we said, 2008, 2009, somewhere in there in Syracuse and WAER, I think, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time, Valente. At least now we're talking about a better basketball team, a team that's got a chance to win an NBA championship. Although when we were at Syracuse, they had some decent teams, but nothing like this. I'll say that.
Well, I was going to say this till later, but we can do this now just real quick, right off the cuff. Is Boeheim done? Boeheim's done, right? He's done. Like, Dunzo. Like, we got to get him out of there.
Well, it looks like he's going to outlast Jay Wright. How about that? Jay Wright's retiring. Boeheim's still there. But, I mean, I'm with you, man. It's like a family affair at this particular point in time. It feels like, and I don't know, maybe this is just a coincidence, but ever since Mike Hopkins left for the Washington job, and I know he hasn't had a ton of success there, but ever since he left, the recruiting has just gone down the tube.
Awful. I mean, they can't, and the guys they get, they can't even keep. It's just annoying.
When's the last time they had a McDonald's All-American? They used to get him every year. When I was there, they always had him, whether it be Johnny Flynn, all these guys that were coming in, Dion Waiters, although I guess technically Dion didn't make the team. He was snubbed. He was really mad about that, but they always had All-Americans. Yeah, Michael Carter-Williams.
Dion was a Jordan Brand guy, though, I think he made that team, but he didn't make the All-American. He did not make the McDonald's. I feel like it's either MCW. I think it's MCW. Like, it's got to be the last guy. What's up?
Rakeem Christmas was McDonald's.
Jimmy Fallon's favorite basketball player, Rakeem Christmas. Although he was good, though. But anyway, we got to get off this Syracuse stuff because nobody's here for that. We're here to talk about the Celtics. And I asked Brian, you can follow him on Twitter. It's Brian Barrett. Okay. That's his Twitter handle. And the one thing about Barrett that I really like, and it's the thing that Sean Grandy does, but instead of doing it at like 3:00 in the morning, Barrett does it when people are actually awake and can read this stuff. And Barrett gives out all these great stats, a lot of great baseball stuff recently, obviously with the Sox coming into play, but he's been killing really fun stats all season long. And so before we got on the podcast, I said, Barrett, do me a favor, pick out your favorite stat right now in this series. Lay it on me. What's your favorite stat so far?
All right, so there's so many good ones to pick from. I mean, this is very difficult for me to do as somebody that likes the numbers, okay, Evan? So you're putting me in a difficult spot here, but I got one for you. And I feel like this plays to the masses. This plays to Celtics fans. So we know that Kyrie had an outstanding game 1. Nobody's going to dispute that. Although I do contend that the fans were in his head at the end because he dribbled the air out of the ball and then he threw that hut bag to Durant. Durant just had to hoist it up. He threw up a brick. And then, of course, the Celtics go on. We all know what happened after that. But Kyrie has 39 in that game. Last night, he pulls the Houdini act in the fourth quarter. I don't know where the hell he went. I don't know if he was playing. I don't know what was going on there. But he had 10 points in that game. So he has 49 points so far in the series. Pretty easy math. Well, the Celtics, when Kyrie, I almost said Kyrie because a host I used to work with used to call him Kyrie. But when Kyrie was the primary defender last night in the series, the Celtics have now scored 49 points on Kyrie. So he scored 49. The Celtics have scored 49 on him. And there has been an effort. And I feel like Ime Udoka has obviously instilled this with these guys. They're not just attacking Kyrie. They are hunting Kyrie. Jaylen in particular had 9 points against him last night and 7 points against him in round 1 and in game 1. And obviously he's not the main defender, Jaylen Brown. Why would you ever do that? So I just love the fact that they're hunting that guy and they're exposing him for what he is on the defensive side of the floor, which is a bad player on that side. He's a DH. He plays one way.
Yeah, and it's like somebody tweeted this out, and I apologize for not calling out that person correctly. If you know who you are, but I saw it earlier, and I thought it was a really great way to put it. Boston had been at the other end of the small point guard matchup for years. Kyrie, Isaiah Thomas, Kemba Walker. It's like, can they get a point guard with some size so we get exposed? And then, you go back to that Bulls series years ago where they had to play a 2-3 zone because Isaiah Thomas was getting absolutely roasted in pick and roll coverage. So they put Isaiah at the bottom of the 2-3 zone in the weak side corner to say, you know what, stay over there and just don't let anybody get by it. Like, all right, just hang on over there. We'll play 4-on-5 with you in the corner and we'll figure it out. Somehow still won that series. To me, it's remarkable, but it's nice to be on the other end of that where Boston, look, and the way that they're playing right now, I love the way they're playing right now. And I was going to get to this maybe a little bit later. Maybe I'll do it now. The way that this team hunts mismatches, but also shares the ball simultaneously is really fun to watch. And we talked about, credit to Ime throughout the season, the rest of the coaching staff, and the guys for buying in. But what they're doing is they're finding mismatches and taking advantage of things when they need to take advantage of them. And picking on Kyrie Irving is a great way to get easy points. I mean, you look at the other night, of course, Kyrie's caught napping at the end of the game. Tatum gets a layup at the rim. Game over. You go back to last night's game, or I should say Wednesday night's game, depending on when you listen to this. Tatum had a point where he had Kyrie on him late I believe it's either late in the third, late in the fourth. I think it's late in the fourth, where Tatum gets Kyrie in a switch, backs him down a little bit, spins towards the middle of the floor, has to kind of put up like an awkward like floater with the left hand. But because Kyrie does like 3/4 of the effort, but doesn't quite challenge the shot, just keeps his hands down, Tatum, by jumping up in the air, gets a really solid look at the rim. And it's just like, oh yeah, this is easy for me. I'm 6'8" and I'm an all-star. Bang. Easy points. They can hunt him whenever they want. And what was funny was game one, Kyrie was hunting Peyton Pritchard and Ime made a quick, okay, we're not playing Peyton Pritchard the rest of the way when Kyrie's on the floor, made a quick adjustment there. I'm not quite sure what Steve Nash does because, as we pointed out in game one, and not, of course, not in game two, but they desperately need Kyrie Irving's offense to beat the Celtics right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like what adjustments could Steve Nash possibly make? The thing about Ime Udoka is he has a lot of different things that he can go to and things that he can try out. But with Nash, I just don't know how many options he really has. I felt like he played one card last night, which worked. I mean, Bruce Brown at times did frustrate Tatum. Tatum did not score on Bruce Brown. I felt like that was a nice adjustment from Steve Nash. But then during the game, he really doesn't do anything. Like, I don't know what the hell he's looking at. How many times, or is he ever going to get Kevin Durant open with some sort of an advantage, like anything, like an Iverson cut where he cuts across the elbows, gets the ball and move? Because clearly taking on Jason Tatum head on, it doesn't work. It's not going to work for him in the series. He's 2 for 13 in the series. He was 0 for 7 last night. He's turning the ball over left and right when Jason Tatum's covering him. So Steve Nash, and I don't know why I'm mad about Steve Nash, but he's not helping Kevin Durant whatsoever. So keep doing that if you're Steve Nash. But I think the biggest thing that I took away from what was going on in this series is right off the jump last night, Kevin Durant is off Tatum. He is now covering Al Horford. He's hanging out with the big man Al because they realized, oh man, Tatum has now developed into this guy that is not just an elite scorer. He's clearly been a much better playmaker in the second half of the season. And so now he's leading the dance. He's running the show. And Durant's going to cover him on that side. It's just taking so much energy out of Durant that they had to make that switch and put Bruce Brown on Jason Tatum. And Tatum on the other side, no, he's still covering Kevin Durant, which I love to see, where like Jason Tatum wants him. He wants this matchup. And I give Kevin Durant credit for this because on Draymond's podcast, Jason Tatum said, hey, when we were playing for Team USA this summer, they had a game against the select team and Tatum kicked the ball to Durant in the corner and Durant got mad at him. He said, I need you to be a killer. Tatum said to Draymond Green, I realized at that moment, like, oh, I'm not there yet, but I can get to that level. So I think he deserves credit for Jason Tatum emerging into the superstar player a little bit in a weird way. So thank you, Kevin Durant, for helping up Jason Tatum destroy you so far in the series. And then secondarily, the playmaking I referenced with Ime Udoka, January 21st, I'll never forget it, that ugly game. I know you remember it, Valenti. They were playing the Portland Trailblazers. No Dame.
Yeah, I remember this.
No CJ. This is before CJ got traded. Tatum couldn't throw the ball in the damn ocean. Ime Udoka says after the game, what are you doing when your shot's not falling? And after that, he went on a streak where he was over 5 assists for like 2 months. Prior to that, he was under 4 assists per game. So I do feel like the coaching of Ime Udoka, Durant's sort of assist to Jason Tatum in a weird way, he's at a totally different level now where you can make a real compelling argument that he's one of the 5 best players in the sport.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder on my favorite stat there. As I had one ready for you. The best stat for me, it's just Tatum as KD's primary defender. 8 points so far this series on 2 of 13 shooting, 0 from 3 3-point range, no assists, 7 turnovers.
Have some.
That's unbelievable. I mean, look, and you and I, and all this people listening to this podcast, this is not going to matter because most of us watch either every game or almost every game. You miss a couple maybe here and there. It's an 82 game season. Look, I get it. I'm not going to watch all of them, but we watch most of them. And for anybody that's paid attention, especially here in 2022, knows that Tatum has been top 7, top 9. I mean, he's going to make first team All NBA, so he's in the single digit, like top whatever player in the NBA. You listen to Zach Lowe and Tim Bontemps at a pod this week, and they talked about like where is like Tatum in the hierarchy of the superstars league, because Tatum's a superstar no matter what Nick. And look, I love Nick Wright. As Syracuse guys, we cape for Nick because he's a Syracuse guy. But Nick, like keeping Tatum out of the superstar threshold, I think at this point is ridiculous, because what he's doing to what is the best scoring forward maybe of all time, the best scorer period since Jordan maybe. I mean, a really really elite list. What Tatum is doing, and it's not just Tatum, it is a collection of guys. As Durant said in the post game after game 2, like they're sending 2-3 guys at me when I'm off the ball, never mind when he's on the ball. But for what Tatum is doing right now in this series at his age, this is what superstars do. This is what it looks like as they take the leap. And I know we'll get more into Tatum in the game. We'll have a bunch of that stuff. But the fact that Boston has taken arguably the best scorer in basketball, and it's not just he's like, because going into the series, you think, Durant's gonna be the best player in the series. Tatum will be the second best player in the series. It's how the chips fall after that. Durant hasn't been not only the best player, he hasn't been the second best player, he hasn't been the third best player, he hasn't been the fourth best player, he hasn't been the fifth best player. Durant hasn't touched as a top 5 player in this series yet. And a big part of that is because of what Tatum's doing to him on the defensive end. It is amazing to watch, Barrett.
Yeah, I was wondering how far you were going to go. I'm like, all right, he's at 5, he's at 6.
No, I mean, you got a certain point, like Durant, like even just being out there with the gravity that Durant has, you can't be lower than 5. I don't think.
Yeah, and I think part of it is it's predatorial, right? I mean, you look at these guys, and really, I give Ime Udoka and Brad Stevens deserves a lot of credit for this, right? Because you mentioned the fact that we talked about earlier, the fact that they're hunting Kyrie Irving. Well, unless Daniel Tice is on the court, and Peyton Pritchard to a lesser extent, but Ime Udoka is basically taking Pritchard off the court when Kyrie comes back on, except last night in the fourth quarter it worked. I mean, they busted out this lineup that they haven't used all season. They used this lineup that they hadn't used all season. They used it for 5 minutes the entire season. It was the Al, Grant, Pritchard, and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And it worked last night. They went on a 12-2 run with those guys. But ordinarily, he's been good keeping Pritchard away from Kyrie, because usually a small defender is not going to bother Kyrie because he can just get to his shot. So you need a bigger body on him naturally. And Smart's got a 6'10" wingspan. So obviously he can handle it. But with the Celtics, this is what I love about this team so much. This is why after they beat the Memphis Grizzlies, that game where Jaylen didn't play, and there was like this debate going on, like who's a better player, Jason Tatum or John Morant? I'm like, you kidding me? I mean, have you seen John Morant shoot from the perimeter? Like, I don't know. And most people, like a lot of people here were thinking that it was John Morant. But anyway, my overwhelming point, as I digress, is just the fact that the Celtics have basically built a team. And when Robert Williams is back, this won't even be a question, that without Tice, there is nobody that you can pick on this team defensively, right? So it's like, all right, Durant's going for a switch. Okay, here comes Jaylen. Okay, he's going for a switch. Here comes Marcus Smart. And Al Horford has been absolutely tremendous. Al Horford, and this is part of the reason that the Celtics defense, Marcus Smart, we know Defensive Player of the Year. Robert Williams should have got way more votes, and he had 8 points. I mean, are you kidding me? The guy's one of the best shot blockers in the league. But the overwhelming point is just the fact that they have so many guys that you can't attack whatsoever. Horford defended more isolation possessions than anybody in the league this year. Al Horford, 35-year-old Al Horford. That's why this team is so good defensively, is the switchability. And it seems like, and Durant mentioned, it's an easy system to play, which it is. You don't have to think that much. But only so many teams can do it. You have to have so many good defensive players. And that's why I felt like, and I know he's been not great in this series at all. I mean, that's putting it lightly. But that's why I felt like the Derek White pickup made so much sense, because he fits in perfectly to the scheme in terms of what they want to do defensively. And that's why I think the Nets, they're going to have real difficulty scoring on this team in the second half of games. We've seen it in the first half. They started to go off last night, but then they start to wear down, and then the Celtics get to them on the other side.
Yeah, you look at last night's game, Boston gets down early. They're turning the ball over a ton. They're just not communicating on either end that well. They're getting burnt defensively in certain aspects. They're getting killed on the glass. I mean, absolutely roasted on the glass. But yet, like, they're down 17, not feeling great at all. Because, Kevin Durant, they're down, the season down 17, and Durant hasn't really even hit a shot yet. Like, it's been Bruce Brown and Goran Dragic. Like, what the hell's going on here? But they made a push.
Enough with Dragic, by the way. I'm having flashbacks to the bubble. Like, enough of that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking to some of my friends. It's like, wow, Dragic is really killing you guys. Like, for those of you that don't understand, like, this is par for the course for the Celtics. Like, this guy, I don't know what it is. Like, there are certain. It's like Chris Middleton's the same thing. It's like it just sees the jersey, and like all of a sudden he's Michael Jordan against any like the Monstars basically. It's like ridiculous. I don't understand it. Like Goran Dragic coming off like COVID's just like going to be a stone cold assassin makes all the sense in the world because the way he's done this against Boston for years, but like. You have a ridiculous, like, 9-0 run, 11-0 run from Bruce Brown to start the game. Like, so Nets are up 17. They get to 10. But it was funny to listen to the discourse at halftime, like, because I was watching the local broadcast for the game, but I did tune into the TNT halftime guys just to see what they were talking about. And Chuck was like, if you're the Nets, this should be a 20-point game right now, and it's 10. And you got to be really afraid of what's coming next because Boston's really starting to figure it out. And he couldn't have been more right on. Boston pulled away at it, chipped away. And when they finally took the lead, the building I thought was going to explode. And at that point, and you've seen a bunch of basketball, Barrett. It's not like when a team that's been battling all game finally takes their first lead late in the game, unless you have a response immediately of like a 10-0 run, it's almost like the game's over because most of the time, again, I don't have the stat in front of me. So don't throw a stat at me like, oh, actually, whatever. No. It just feels like a lot of times the momentum is such a different shift. Like how many times did we see it in the regular season? Boston would have all these ginormous leads. Like the game early against Chicago, I think is probably my favorite example of this, where Boston was up, I forget, like 20 plus in that game early on in the season in Chicago. But
yeah,
as soon as Chicago took the lead, you're like, wow, this game's over. There's no way this team comes back from this. I felt very similar to that during this, like, as much as it feels sacrilege to say, like, yeah, I felt super confident against Durant and Kyrie that they were going, but I did. Boston was just playing the right way. And meanwhile, on the other end, they were making it very difficult for Durant to do anything. Durant had his worst half in his career last night, Barrett. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it really was. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I totally agree with what Charles Barkley said. I didn't hear him say that, but I was looking at it at halftime and the Nets were shooting 61%. I actually tweeted at the time, I'm like, wait, the Nets are shooting 61%. They're only up by 10. This doesn't make sense whatsoever. It comes back to the whole idea of their defense is just so pathetic. And what I love about the Celtics team right now is it feels like you got to knock them out, right? So they had their opportunity, the Nets did, in the first half of that game, in particular in the first quarter. They could have delivered the knockout blow. And the Celtics just kept coming back. They kept taking all the haymakers. Like, that's what the Nets threw. They did it in the fourth quarter of game one, too. I mean, Kyrie coming out of the gates in that fourth quarter.
That the guy was absolutely smart. Was like, I couldn't even. Of course, it went in, but it was like that's a shot you make when you're supposed to win the game. It's like this ridiculous step back three with the defensive player of the year in your face.
Yeah, and I just feel like, so if you don't knock them out, if you don't connect on those haymakers, then you're in massive trouble because the Celtics have shown this. I mean, it's crazy talking about that Bulls game, this incredible amount of resilience so far in this series. And I do think part of it is the fact that they said, hey, we want him, right? I mean, they did. And look, I'll admit it. I was like, you know what? I'll take the easier path. I'll take the baby dinosaurs in the first game, even though we didn't know everything about the vaccine situation. You win two at home. Even if you come back with a 3-1 lead, you ended in 5. Like, I'm like, all right, that seems like an easier path. And Giannis and Kevin Durant can deal with each other. But now I think, like, they needed this, right? Tatum and Brown and this group together, Marcus Smart, et cetera. Like, they needed this sort of like almost like a badge of honor. And Ime Udoka is the one that instilled this on the team from the beginning. Remember, he's the one that told Jason Tatum, stop treating these guys like they're your older brothers, referring to guys like Durant around the league. Like, you're on this level. So I do feel like that bravado and really, like, it's a healthy arrogance that they have now. I mean, Marcus Smart's walking in there last night with the defensive player of the year thing. Jaylen Brown's getting in Durant's face. Tatum will talk smack to him. Al Horford is chirping Durant last night. So I do think there is, and Grant, that guy talks so much smack. I like, Amazing role player. And this is another thing about confidence with Grant Williams, right? He's one of the best corner 3-point shooters in the league until the beginning of March, where he's over 50%. Well, from like March until through game one, the guy was shooting like 34% on corner threes. Last night, the guy has like the perfect basketball game. He doesn't miss a three. He doesn't miss a goal. He doesn't miss a free throw. His like effective field goal percentage, which accounts for threes, is like 137%. It's like incredible. So I do feel like that confidence, I give Ime Udoka credit for that in totality. He's the one that instilled that in the team. And that's why they're not going to just lay down. Like other teams would have laid down with the way it went last night. The Celtics are not going to lay down. They continue to fight back. I love it.
Yeah, and they're showing a lot of toughness. And like the thing with me, it starts with the top guys. And you look at the top guys, Tatum, and I look at Brown. Like Brown, we've gotten to hear a little bit out of in terms of like he was mic'd up for a little bit. Some of the stuff he's been saying in the huddles and stuff like that. Playing through the bloody nose through game one. You know, a lot of people making the big deal of like Kyrie's fasting. Well, so is Jaylen Brown, by the way, just to throw that out there. Jaylen Brown, also Muslim, also fasting during the game. So it's not like, you know, Kyrie's the only guy doing that. But Jaylen, you know, and Jason gets a ton of attention as he should. But like Jaylen, you know, what I like about Jaylen so far this series, and especially like the end of game one and game two, like things haven't always gone his way on either end of the floor. Like sometimes he gets a little tired and he dribbles the ball off his leg and he does the over dribbling thing. But Jaylen is just doing an insane job of finishing through contact right now. And he's been doing it for the past couple of months. He's been paying attention, but he's just making tough shots. He's on the floor. He's everywhere defensively. He's pushing the ball in transition when it looks like some guys don't want to run. He's getting to the basket. He's getting to the free throw line. His toughness through two games, and especially I think in game one, I think it's been not surprising, but super. It makes me more confident, right? Because you look at, you know, Durant's the best player in the series. You know, Tatum's number 2. You know, where is Brown? Can Brown be 3, or is Brown 4, or is somebody else going to be those 3, 4, and Brown is 5? Like everybody was like, oh, you know, we all know what they have with Jason Tatum, but like, what do they have after Jason? And I keep saying, like, has anybody watched Jaylen Brown this year? I mean, Jaylen has been, you know, in and out of the lineup with certain things, but when he's been healthy, he's been scoring 25 points a game. Like these two guys at the beginning of the season were the highest scoring duo in the league. What has happened since then is they've added a little more playmaking to their games and not scoring as much. But like when they need to take over games, Jaylen's right there too. And yeah, it might not be the prettiest thing to start out, but Jaylen in fourth quarters has been unbelievable. And last night, I think, was the heart and soul of the win last night. And you give the Tatum all you want, but he hit the biggest shots when the game got really close. And then when it tied, and then when they took the lead and ballooned it, that was all Jaylen Brown to me, I think.
Yeah, just imagine if Tatum and Brown could actually play together. Like if you didn't have to split them up. I mean, it would.
I've been fighting that for years. It's driving me crazy.
It was such a dumb take. It was incredibly dumb. But just getting back to your point about Jaylen, I do feel like ever since they went on that West Coast road trip when they went out to Golden State, it felt like he got his shot back, because I would contend, like right when he came back from that injury, struggling shooting the ball a little bit, and then he looked like the Jaylen that we saw for the majority of the season. And I totally agree with your point about him being the aggressor. So like if you look at it, he is getting downhill because they know the Nets don't have anybody to keep in front of Jaylen. I feel like part of the reason they took Bruce Brown off Jaylen is because that's a bad matchup for Bruce Brown. Jaylen Brown just too explosive. In a weird way, he's better equipped to cover Tatum because Tatum is bothered by guys that can sort of get underneath him. But Jaylen is just putting pressure on the basket. He's averaging 15 points per game in the paint in this series, but he has put a ton of pressure on the basket. And the most impressive thing to me about this is he did that in the fourth quarter, as you mentioned, where most guys are starting to fatigue. Most guys are starting to get tired. And he was just putting constant pressure on the rim in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Jaylen is going to always be not the ultimate X factor, but like the guy, if this team's able to make it work, it's going to be because Jaylen Brown is ascended into something else. And I mean, obviously when they get Rob back, life becomes a little bit easier, but like, I as we go through, like, you know, giving out awards, giving out flowers and all that stuff in terms of game 2, like, I just feel like I'm not like the discourse today is weird because it's more about killing the Nets and specifically Kyrie and KD for not being good and not giving enough credit to like what Boston is doing on both ends of the floor. And getting lost in all this stuff is like pretty amazing games by Jaylen Brown and Peyton Pritchard and Grant Williams. and Al Horford. Like, it drives me nuts because like there's two teams on the floor. Like, yes, did the Nets not play well? Absolutely, but a big reason for that is Boston is just nails defensively. I'll tweet this literally every game if I have to. The Boston Celtics, and again, I understand it's not like a perfect comparison, but just for stats' sake, the Boston Celtics held their opponents in the regular season to 42% from the field. You want to know who did that? The 04 Pistons did that. Same thing. Well, I find it slightly more impressive because the pace is much higher and there are more 3-pointers taken today, which could, skew it a little bit, I guess, in the Celtics' favor because it's a harder shot. But at the same time, like, hold your opponent to 42% shooting for the entire season is pretty impressive. And then lost in that on the other side, offensively, like Boston moves the ball extremely well. The ball movement is what's killing the Nets. And whether it's, the second half of last night, and again, Chuck alluded to it going into halftime. He was like, look, the Boston has started to figure some stuff out. And if the Nets aren't careful, they're going to lose this game. And Boston saw that and just like, yeah, we just got to move the basketball a little bit more than we are, play a little less ISO, and we're going to kill these guys. And wide open shot after wide open shot, wide open shot. I want to make sure that we give enough credit to certain guys. Like Jaylen gets enough credit for me. I think Grant Williams, as you mentioned, the 134 true shooting percentage is outrageous. Pritchard, for what do you have, 4 minutes in game one, comes out in game two, and it's like 4 huge shots in the fourth quarter.
He crossed up Kyrie.
It was unbelievable. Like, and this is what it takes, though. My point is this. You can have all the talent in the world, and the Nets have two of the best isolation scorers in the history of basketball. It doesn't matter. It's still a team game, and you still need all 5 guys to work together. And when you look at this after 2 games, and I think, again, last night, look at the second half as a very easy way to look at this. One team's playing with 5 guys, the other team's playing with 2.5. And 5 guys beats 2.5 every time in my book, Barrett, right? Am I crazy on that?
No, you're right. I do think too, like they have beat the Nets at their own game in the sense that like they love, as you mentioned, the isolation situations. They've had 32 possessions in ISO in this series, and they're shooting 28%. They have 25 points. This is the best isolation team in the league with Kevin Durant and with Kyrie Irving, and they can't get anything done whatsoever. And I do think like one of the things that worried me coming into this series was the Celtics are such an analytical team defensively. Like they force you to take horrible shots. They want you to take a ton of mid-range shots. They don't want you to get into the restricted area. Like they give up the second fewest shots in the restricted area, and they force the second most in the mid-range. And I'm thinking, well, hold on. They got mid-range assassins, right? Kevin Durant and Kyrie. And I was a little bit worried about that entering the series. Last night, they're 28 from the mid-range. And during this, that's 28.6% during the season. They're over 47, which is like 3% better than any other team. Durant was 2 for 12. So this worry that I had entering the series is these guys were so good at it. And I shouldn't have done this. I almost underestimated how much of the pressure that the Celtics can bring to you defensively would bother Kevin Durant, would bother Kyrie Irving, and in particular Durant. I mean, you think about some of these shots that Durant's getting, these pull-ups, where Jason Tatum does this amazing thing. Like, even if he gets picked off, he'll like contest his shot from the side. Like I mean, this is stuff that you see from guys that are like 8-9 years into their career. So the Nets are actually like, they're taking shots that they ordinarily take. The problem is they're not used to them being contested the way that they're ordinarily contested. So they're living in the same areas they've always lived in. They don't really have an offensive system. Hey, give the ball to Durant, give the ball to Kyrie Irving. That's it. I mean, the Celtics have a system. The ball's flying around. But if you continue to play this way, this isolation style against the Celtics, you're screwed. And I give the Celtics credit. They force you into that because of that switching style. The only time they don't do it is if Daniel Tice is on the court. He's the one guy that they will not switch all the time. They're mixing up the coverages. I give them credit for being able to do some of that. But I mean, imagine if they had Robert Williams for the series. This would be a bloodbath.
Yeah,
bloodbath.
I want to piggyback on that point. I was before you and I hopped in this Zoom. I read an article Zach Cram had it on the Ringer, and it was basically, and again, go read it for yourself. I'm not going to just quote it all day. But the crux of the piece was Boston is getting some of the easiest looks you could possibly ask for, and they're making the Nets take the hardest shots you could possibly take. And when you can do that as a team, you're going to win a lot of basketball games. It's just as easy as that. 114-107 win in game 2 yesterday, or last night, I should say, Wednesday night. A lot of heroes in that game. We talked about Jaylen Brown. Their bench has played, I think, in spots really well, in certain cases not so well. I mean, game 1, you look at it's basically Jason Tatum doing everything and guys kind of coming up and filling in. Tatum for most of the game, Brown towards the end of the game was great. Smart was outrageous in that game. But I want to talk about what I think has been maybe quietly like the surprising storyline of this particular series. And that's just how unbelievable Al Horford is playing. I can be honest with you. Like, I traded for Al. I loved it because I like the continuity. I love what Al brought to the team when he was on the team years ago. I'm very well aware of his age and what that body can do at that age. It's not like, certain guys break down easier than others. But what Al is doing, he was plus 11 last night. That was tied with Tatum for second high on the team. And I forget what he was in game one, plus whatever. But what Al Horford has done in 2 games against this team is remarkable. On one end, he's playing great defense. He's moving the ball. He's taking advantage of either being left in the corner for 3-point range or getting smaller guy switched on him. Are you surprised, Barrett, at how effective 35-year-old Al Horford has been in this series?
I mean, I thought he would have a good series because he's been good all season. And I thank Oklahoma City for putting him on ice at the end of the season because clearly he is well rested. Right. He is surprised. So thank you very much, Sam Presti, for that. But to this degree, I can't say I'm not surprised. I mean, the guy's been absolutely ridiculous. And I do feel like when this move was made, I loved it at the time too. I agree with you. And I agree. I loved it for a different reason at first. I'm like, well, it's just I like him as a guy and all that. I love you personally, but it just was never going to work. And the guy, I didn't like the signing from the beginning just because he had already had 3 procedures on that knee, small diminutive point guard. We talked about that earlier today. But nonetheless, I felt like, okay, well, now you are signaling it's Tatum and Brown's team, right? That was the big thing. And then I felt like, well, Al's always been a great ball mover, big body. We know that he can shoot. And for the majority of the season, he wasn't shooting well. Then really at the start of March, he started shooting well. This series, he's 5 of 8 from 3-point territory. But without Al, this defensive scheme doesn't work. And if you look at it in this series, I mean, they have really been not good at all when Al goes to the bench. If you look at his on-off differential per 100, 74 minutes he's played, the Celtics are plus 14.2 per 100. 22 minutes off the court, they're negative 29.7.
That's
right. So that's the differential is a plus 43.9. He's covering ISOs, he's hitting shots. And I loved what Ime Udoka did there when they went on that run when Al was on the court with that group with Grant and Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Peyton Pritchard, is since Al can hit threes, he put Al in the corner, and that keeps Kevin Durant out of the lane. So Kevin Durant's basically not involved in the possession whatsoever. It opens everything up for Pritchard, with Tatum, with Brown. It's a wide open court. So I feel like the increased volume that Al's been willing to take in terms of the threes and the defense, it's amazing. I mean, Tatum, Brown, Al, I mean, you could argue that Al has been one of the top 2 players in this series. I mean, based on the contribution. I mean, where are you in the first half without Al in game 1? I mean, the guy was tremendous.
Yeah, 20 points, 15 rebounds in game 1. Again, I agree with you. If he's not playing as well as he did in game 1, they probably don't win that game. And I think there's just a steadying presence with him on the floor. As much as I love Daniel Tice, and I was, again, when people were talking about that trade, and giving the Celtics a bunch of flack for taking on future money, and I'm like, what are we doing here? We're killing the Celtics taking on a $10 million future contract for a guy, again, with continuity, who's been in the system. They know him, they know what he's good at, they know what he's bad at, they know what he can do. I love Tice, but when Al's not on the floor, I get a little nervous because you have Grant Williams, inexperienced, and you have Daniel Tice, who's a little older, but yet inexperienced with NBA playoff basketball. Al's the only big they have that has that steadying presence of a vet that can be like, all right, guys, we need to, calm down. Again, you can see Al sometimes saying it too. We got to calm down. We got to take it easy. We got to get into our sets. We have to move the ball around, do all this stuff. And having it come from him, because he's by far the oldest guy on the team. I mean, you look at Smart's been on the team the longest, but he's still in his 20s. That your 2 superstars are 25 and 24. Al's the only guy with any real, I mean, they've all had experience in the playoffs, but just real legitimate. He's the only guy that's a real vet on the team. So having him there is huge. And I'm starting to get a little nervous though about how many minutes he's playing, because it's at some point I'm expecting the wheels to fall off the bus here and for Al to just crumble. But what they've been able to do with him, keeping him fresh the whole year, it's all paying off huge right now. Because I would make the argument, and I don't think you would fight me against this, he's been the second best player on either side in this series. And the only guy that's playing better than him is Tatum, because Tatum had the outrageous game 1. But Al has been, to me, the second best player. And I think going forward, once they get Rob back, they'll be able to ease him up a little bit as Rob gets a little bit healthier. And I think as they move forward, as we look at game 3, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Like, there's going to be still some pressure on him just to make sure that the big rotation stays somewhat in flux. Like, he got in foul trouble last night, and that got me a little nervous. And by the time he fouled out, I was feeling okay. But like, if he fouls out or has foul trouble, like, they're in a little bit of trouble. Maybe not against the Nets, because the Nets don't have the size. Like, Drummond is fine, and Claxton is, a nice guy, I guess. But like, there's nobody that strikes fear into you down there. But when Al's not playing, like, they're a little bit more exposed, right?
Yeah, how about that free throw that Claxton took last night? It was like 3 feet short. I'm like, dude, I almost felt bad for the guy.
I would have hacked him the rest of the way. It's
and
like,
that's another
shoot the rest of the game, bro. There's no chance that you're not 2 free throws.
Like, if the Nets ever get hot in the fourth quarter again and Claxton's on the floor, I mean, just wrap that guy up. Yeah, but I'm with you on the minutes thing, and I do feel like it's not just Al. And it felt like Ime Udoka paid attention to that a little bit more last night, because one of the things he did is Tatum played around 40 minutes. In the first game, he played 45. And when I looked at that game 1, I felt like in the fourth quarter, obviously he had the great shot, the great spinning move late that, of course, was fed by Smart. But Tatum was sort of gassed in that fourth quarter. I mean, that was his first bucket. So I do think that Ime Udoka, and he rode those guys a lot down the stretch of the season, I do think he's a little more cautious about the minutes. The good thing for the big man rotation is you're going to get Robert Williams back. If it's not in this series, obviously it'll be in the next series. One thing I'm surprised he hasn't tried more of is, and I wonder if this is just, he just likes to be big, he just likes, and he feels like they have that physical advantage, is I'm surprised they haven't tried, and maybe they will, Grant at the 5 a little bit now that he's hitting shots, just because if Grant's at the 5, at least you can still switch everything defensively, as long as like Pritchard's not on the court. If it's Smart and Grant with like the majority of the wing size guys, then I feel like you can still switch everything and be honest to your defensive system. And that's why when Tice is on the court without Al, there's really not much protection there. So I would just gamble and try to go a little bit more small ball, although we haven't seen much of it and they're up to nothing. So I can't really criticize much of what Ime Udoka is doing, but I'm wondering if they do try to do that, because Tice, it's been a problem defensively. I mean, they have a 120 defensive rating when he's on the floor, 109 when he's off the floor. I just feel like they've done a good job, like trying to mix it up. Like, he'll drop, sometimes he'll jump it, try to blitz it. I just feel like that's the one weak guy they have defensively that plays major minutes. And like, Tice's a good player. I'm not saying that. It's just when you get into the playoffs, it's all matches. We've seen the Celtics take advantage of Curry and Kyrie on the defensive, and that's the one guy that the Nets are targeting. I mean, they're not targeting anybody else besides him, and with the exception of like Pritchard being on the court. But even last night, I don't know what happened in the fourth quarter. I thought when they kept Pritchard out there that Kyrie was going to go hunt him, and I don't know where Kyrie was. I mean, apparently he was on the court, but I didn't see him.
Yeah, I love. We had a little discussion last night, Kaufman and I, and a buddy of ours were talking about some of Kyrie's post game comments. Like the common denominator, the common theme was, is Kyrie already checked out? Because some of the stuff he said after the game last night, including his performance in the fourth quarter, I don't want to. I'm not putting any words in his mouth. I'm definitely not trying to start anything, but like, I'd be a little alarmed if I were a Nets fan. But looking at game 3. Saturday night, it's messed up. It's BS that we have to wait again forever for game 3 here. Although I should be happier about it, considering it does help Rob give another day. I just want to watch basketball.
Just some extra rest.
Yeah, it's true. And these guys, again, especially like a guy like Al, we just talked about his minutes. Like, yeah, get him some more rest. It's actually not a bad thing. I'm just selfish, Barrett. I want to watch this team play. Okay. Looking at a game 3, going into Brooklyn, like, I don't know, just probably do the same thing you've been doing. I mean, I just don't really think they have I found it very interesting. I forget who I was listening to, I forget which pod. It might have been the Low Post, it might have been Simmons. I forget exactly who but they were talking about how like this doesn't feel like game 1. It was like Russillo and Simmons. Like game 1 didn't feel like a game 1 of an opening round series. It felt like game 5 of like a second round or an Eastern Conference Finals series where the other team the teams know each other well. You know what they're good at, know what they're bad at. There's no like huge move coming between these two teams that's going to like make the other team readjust, whatever. Like, no, all the chips are on the table. Like, we know what the Nets are good at, what they're going to try and do. We know what the Nets are going to try and do to Boston the other end. It's just a matter of execution. And when Boston executes, then the Nets can't hang. Like, I don't mean to like discount the Nets, but when Boston executes on both ends of the floor in the minutes that we've seen so far, Boston is the better team by a good margin. And so as we look towards game 3, I'm expecting more of the same, more ball movement on the offensive end, making guys work, making Katie and Kyrie work on the defensive end to tire them out. Ball movement, cutting, getting layups, been doing all game. And again, with Jaylen finishing through contact, there's another advantageous position you can be in because of Jaylen's, strength. And the defensive end, keep switching, keep guys in front, make life hard for Durant. Like, I don't think there's some big revelation coming here in game 3. Maybe game 4 with Ben Simmons, as we found out, some Shams Charania Ben's gonna try it out for game 4, which I don't think really even matters. But like game 3, it's just gonna be the same stuff. And Boston and the Nets are gonna see what happens. I don't think it's gonna be any different.
I'm so confused by the Simmons thing. Like, when did he hurt his back? I don't understand this. He got an epidural in his back. Why didn't he have that when he was still like technically a member of the Philadelphia 76ers? Like, I'm so confused by this whole situation. I just feel like, it's a really tough ask. You're going to put him, his first game of the season is going to be in game 4, potentially, of a playoff series.
You or die, by the way. Potentially.
Yeah. Like, and you got to guard Tatum or Brown. Like, I just feel like that's an awful position to put the guy in. Not to mention the fact, do we know if he's going to shoot? Like, the last time we saw Ben Simmons on a basketball court, he refused to dunk. He wouldn't dunk. So it's so weird how, like, they're playing this whole situation and how people are acting like Ben Simmons is like, the Warriors getting back Steph Curry or something like that. Like, it's this unbelievable force of nature when the guy was a net negative last year in the postseason. His coach, Doc Rivers, after the game was saying, we don't know if we can play with this guy as the point guard long term. So that whole thing kind of confuses me. But I just like them to just keep attacking. They've outscored the Nets 100-66 in the paint. Just stay in attack mode. Don't give them any life, because if they win game 3, they get themselves back in the series. And if you beat them in game 3, they're not going to give you anything in game 4. And really, it's been demoralizing for them so far. My one concern, although I'm starting to not be as concerned about it as I was entering game 2, because now we've seen it twice, is when is the Durant game coming? Like, when is the onslaught of Kevin Durant coming? And the reason I'm not as concerned as I previously was is because even if he has that game, it's going to take so much out of him. Look, think about how hard. He doesn't have any easy shots. He's working so hard for all his shots. I just can't see them making this a competitive series, because I don't see him doing that 4 to the next 5 games. He may have one game where he's outstanding and they still lose. From Kyrie. Kyrie was great in game 1. They lost. Last night they had 18 from Dragic. What was it? 23 from Bruce Brown, and they lost. So I'm starting to believe more and more in, not that I never thought this team wasn't elite defensively, but that they have really, really good matchups for Kevin Durant. And this is some of the worst basketball that he's ever played.
Yeah, it almost feels like last year the last year series, and the roles are a little reversed, where like maybe Durant goes off for 50 and that's what it takes to beat Boston, and that maybe does it like one time. Because if Durant's going to drop 50 points, that means that Bruce Brown is not going to have 23. That means Goran Dragic is going to have 28 points. Like, the way this team is set up defensively, yeah, if Kevin Durant goes off, I'm going to probably guess that nobody else did, because he's taking more shots. He's taking opportunities away from other guys. And Boston's made life so hard for him that, like, I feel like a lot of those shots are going to come late in the shot clock, as things are winding down. Like, Durant's not attacking early because he's going through like what feels like 10 people to get the basketball. And we'll see what Nash does. But I just don't think there's like some magical adjustment here. Like I feel like Nick Nurse would throw out some junk zone defense just to like see what happens. Like, that's not happening with this Nets team. They're not throwing out some junk zone, like a box and one, to screw Tatum up. Like, Tatum's too advanced at this point anyway to even do that. So unless Boston goes cold, and Boston can go cold from the field, we've seen it. It happened in the first half of game 2, and especially in the first quarter. What did Boston shoot? 29% from the field in the first quarter of game 2. Like, it was hard to watch. And it was like, oh no, it's one of these games where Boston can't throw it in the ocean. But that's why you rely on great defense, so you can stay in the game. But I feel like we're like a little too cocky right now. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm a little too confident sitting here being like, yeah, there's no chance. There's nothing that can be done. It's just a matter of like executing. And right now, through 2 games, like Boston has executed better. But at the same time, like we have a good enough amount of evidence to suggest that Boston is the superior team. But let's also point out that the Nets have 2 really great scorers, and they're going to always be in games because they have those 2 guys. But if Boston continues to do what they do, and we don't have any reason to believe they're not going to do what they've been doing, this game, and as Kyle Hurd said yesterday, like if the Nets lose this game, they're going to lose the series, and because 93% of the time, teams that go up 2-0, they win the series. And Boston all time, this is the stats flying around today. Boston all time is 40-1 after going up 2-0. And all the LeBron fans being like, well, guess what that one is? Relax. Please, LeBron fans, get a hobby, cook, paint, go outside, go hiking. I don't care what it is. Find yourself a hobby. There's no need to shoehorn LeBron into every conversation, especially when he's not playing. But this team, hasn't traditionally lost when they're up 2-0. If they win game 3, it is frankly curtains, but it might already be curtains already, Barrett. I don't know. I just don't see something huge some huge change coming in game 3.
Yeah, and that's why, look, maybe we are getting a little too cocky, getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I just I don't know what the card is that Steve Nash can play, because they may go off offensively. We've seen that multiple times this year. We've had good spot offensively, but even if they stay in that the entirety of the game, which I can imagine they do against the Celtics, is on the other end, I just don't see the way that they generate enough stops, right? Because they have been so weak from a defensive perspective that the Celtics were sloppy in the first half, and they were still okay on the offensive end in terms of their numbers, right? And then when you get to the second half is when they really take off, when they cleaned it up and they executed at a higher level. So I just look at it from that perspective, and I don't see them. Maybe Simmons works magic in game 4, but I don't imagine that would happen. So I just don't see how they're going to be able to generate enough stops. The one thing I would say that the thing that they haven't tried yet, I'm just wondering if they don't think they can do it because of the pounding Kevin Durant's already taking on the offensive end, is he hasn't really dug into just say, you know what, screw it. I mean, they need to come up with David strategies at this point, right? I mean, they do. They got to try everything. You mentioned Nick Nurse. Nash is going to do something creative, as they haven't tried the Durant at center lineups at all. Maybe they're just scared of the pounding, but Durant with they got a bunch of munchkins, 6'1" guards. I don't know who would be. Durant even mentioned after the game, he's usually we have 2 guards out there that are 6'1" or 6'2". So, I mean, I guess that would be the only thing, is try to go all offense, because I don't see how they get enough stops defensively. The Celtics put the ball over left and right, and they still put up a 130 offensive rating in the second half.
Now, the thing is, they cut James Johnson right before the playoffs, and anybody with a brain, I mean, look, he might not be an offensive player, but at least James Johnson go out there and defend somebody on the wing. At least he would be, at least make it hard for Brown and Tatum, but they don't have anybody on the team that can really do that. So again, I think maybe we're both a little too honest, but it's just what we've seen. What do you want me to do? I do want to wrap up a little quickly here, because I do want to get to 2 things. Number one, I am enjoying how salty some of the national media is over Marcus Smart's Defensive Player of the Year award winner. I don't understand why so many people are so upset that Smart won Defensive Player of the Year. I just don't understand. They're like, well, Rudy Gobert is great. And I'm like, I'm not trying to take anything away from Gobert. My point is always, we do not value perimeter defense the same way we value rim defense. And I understand why, because you get block shots at the rim. Gobert deters people from driving in the lane, whatever. But they also, that team, Utah, is a mess defensively when he's on the floor because of what they're able to do when they get Gobert on the perimeter. But we just don't value point of attack defense enough. And what I'm really enjoying is watching Smart go out there and just make life really hell for Kyrie Irving. Because it's Kyrie's this otherworldly scorer. But if you look at game 2, Smart guarded his ass off and kept Kyrie from really getting any rhythm at all whatsoever. And again, you and I have been watching it. Celtics have been watching it for the whole year. It's not just about playing one-on-one defense. Smart is an unbelievable off-ball defender, team defender. He's always moving around. He's always shading, and he's always flying into passing lanes and stealing passes that way and getting a hand on this, getting a hand on that. He's always the guy, as the ball is rolling out of bounds or jumping out of bounds off a Celtics player. He's the guy coming from the weak side, throwing it back into somebody to start a fast break. There's so many things he does in the defensive end that people don't value. And I got to tell you, there are a certain amount of people, and I think it was Tom Haberstroh who had the biggest meltdown of anybody about Smart winning defensive player. It's like, look, I understand Rudy Gobert is a great player. He's a good defensive player. Bam didn't play enough games. And I think Mikal Bridges has a legit like kind of gripe because Mikal played 82 games this season on a really good Suns team. But like we need to value perimeter defense and point of attack defense more. And Smart, if he's not the best one, is one of the best ones. And he's on the best defensive team this year. And I think that's an easy argument to make. And I think people are being ridiculous for just being bitter about the whole thing, Brian. I don't get it.
Well, I am kind of surprised, like, how mad people are over it. Like, that was kind of stunning to me. And look, Abistrow, he listed out a bunch of numbers. The one thing that I disagree with him on is the fact he said he's like the 5th best defensive player on the team. I'm like, okay, we're getting a little crazy. Like, you can definitely make an argument against Smart winning it. Like, certainly you could. But, I mean, that's a tough argument to make. 5th best player on the team. The one thing that irritated me about it, like, from just like an ethos perspective, like, I think that the big that can cover multiple positions. Like I think that Draymond Green and Bam are the 2 best defenders in the league, but you mentioned it, that what got held against them is the games played. And that's fair. I mean, Draymond played in 46 games and Bam 56. So it makes sense that Smart would get the bump there. The one thing that sort of aggravated me, and I don't know if this was more of a Celtics push, like the PR campaign, like every team does it. Like they try to hype up their guy. I mean, we've seen it with a bunch of different things, right? In terms of teams hyping up for their MVP, like the Jokic and Embiid thing is out of control. Like teams going after each other with that whole stuff. Like, I mean, Daryl Morey a couple of years ago had like this huge campaign for Harden. So teams go nuts. It's not unique to one team. But what kind of irritated me about this is I would argue that Robert Williams has been the more valuable piece defensively. Smart's great. He's the best. Don't go nuts. He's the best defender in the NBA. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. And Robert Williams missed time. So I understand why the push would be for Smart over Robert Williams. But the thing that kind of irritated me is to see no representation for Robert Williams. What was it, 8 points?
He got a first place vote. Hang on a minute. He got a first place vote.
Who was that?
I don't know.
I know.
Yeah, I don't know who it is.
I like that person.
I know.
If you look at like the on-off, like when Robert Williams comes off the court compared to when Smart comes off the court, all those like impact metrics favor Robert Williams. And I do feel like, and look, maybe partially this is because of Ime Udoka. He made that adjustment. What was it, like midway through the season, where he said, all right, Al is going to cover the traditional big. Robert Williams is going to cover like the shooter in the corner, and he can be like the free safety, the rover, and just come over and help defense. So I actually feel like in just like a per game basis that Robert Williams was the better defensive player, but I understand the games played argument. I just feel like I felt bad for Robert Williams because I don't feel like his voting total was representative of what he did for this team from a defensive perspective. And quite frankly, we're seeing it a little bit in this series. And I do feel like, now I don't know this personally, but it feels like the campaign was for Marcus. And I guess you have to campaign for one guy over the other. And there was like no campaign for Robert Williams. Like right when he got hurt, it's like, he's done. You know, we can't consider him for defensive player of the year. Yet these other guys, like, people are caping for Bam and people are caping for Draymond, I guess to a lesser extent Draymond, but people certainly were pushing Bam and he finished 4th. I just feel like Robert Williams, he was forgotten, and it's almost like his season got erased because he had the injury at the end of the year. And I just felt bad for him personally. And obviously he doesn't care. You saw him celebrating with Marcus Smart, but I thought he certainly deserved more consideration for the award than he actually got. And I feel like Giannis finishing 6th is kind of a joke. That guy's
I'm with you on that. Giannis being 6th is a joke. I think Giannis has to be like in his own category of just like alien stuff, and just put Giannis like number 1. He's the biggest alien in the NBA this year. The guy's, I watched him. Like I watched years ago. I went to a game when Kyrie was on the team, and Kyrie. It was Greek night at the Garden for Giannis, which I thought was so funny. But like Giannis and Kyrie went at it, and Giannis scored the easiest 42 points I've ever seen anybody score. I was like, this is like so dumb. He's unstoppable if he has 1 foot in the paint. It's like it's not even fair. But I agree. Like I agree with both those points. First off, Giannis should probably get more recognition than he does. And what I liked about it, like Rob was very team Smart, but like as soon as Smart won the award, he was like, Rob's gonna win this next. Like he's gonna be the next guy in this team that wins this award. And I agree with you with Bam and Draymond and Rob, like that's kind of where the NBA is headed. Like defensively, they value a guy. Like I think Mikal Bridges will be in this conversation too, because I think Mikal's insane. But like that type of guy that can guard perimeter guys and bigs and hold up against anybody, like that's the guy. And Draymond is the poster child for that. Bam is right behind him, and then Rob and Mikhail will be there. I just think it's cool that somebody else that's not a big won the award. Like for Smart to win, to be the first guy to win since GP in '96 is, I mean, it is amazing, and it is maybe a lifetime achievement award. But at the same time, like people don't even think about guards and wing players when it comes to DPOY. It's always like, all right, who's the best big in the league in terms of defense? Is it Gobert this year? Yeah, it's probably Gobert. Let's give it to Gobert. Like Draymond had to be otherworldly for him to like be in the conversation, and he is an otherworldly defense player. He is the best defense player in the league. But it's like Tony Allen never did. Tony Allen ever finish top 3 for defensive player of the year? Like, and I don't think I've ever seen a better guard defender in my life than Tony Allen. I mean, the guy was ridiculous. So
yeah, and I think that is the difference though between Smart and Tony Allen is, I mean, you could argue that Allen may have been like a better on-ball one-on-one defender, but Smart, like we've seen with so many of these big guys, he's so good like off the ball. He's so good anticipating different things. So I think that's part of it. And I would agree, like maybe it is somewhat of a lifetime achievement award, but it did take a perfect storm for him to get here. Like it's not like, okay, he won it over Bam, and Bam played, what did Marcus play? 71 games. Bam played 71 games too. Like there's a reason that Bam didn't win the award. So it's partially that Draymond missed a bunch of time, Bam missed a bunch of time, and he was one of the 2 best defenders on the best team in the NBA. And the other guy that would have been considered for the award was out with injury. So I do feel like it was a perfect storm. I'm definitely happy for the guy. I'm definitely happy.
Feels like it's like when Pedroia won MVP. It's like when Petey won MVP. It was like, well, he was the healthiest guy, and we're not giving it to Josh Hamilton, so we're giving it to Dustin Pedroia. And I was like, win for short guys everywhere, right? You know, like give it up for the guys that are 5'6", they can win the league. Real quick, as we leave here, I want to shout out Kaufman, not with us here today, on vacation. And I'm doing this at the end of the episode. Kaufman, when I was on vacation, him and Greeny, Dan Greenberg, Boston Sports, took time killing me in the episode that I was gone because Robert Williams got hurt while I was on vacation, and Boston's season looked in jeopardy. And they called me like it's my fault. You know, I screwed everything up. That the reason why the Celtics are screwed is because I left America and I went on vacation. Well, since Adam's been gone, the Celtics are 2-0. So my response to that is, Adam, you're the bad luck guy. It's just like Celtics pride. You're the bad luck guy. I am not. So on behalf of everybody that's a Celtics fan, including Barrett here, please stay on vacation. Don't come back until the season is over and the Celtics are hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. Because until that point, you're going to be considered the bad luck guy. And once you come back and things go south, it is 100% your fault, my friend. Ridiculous. But
yeah, I think you make a good point. We all got to do our part, man. I've been wearing my jumpsuit every game. So we all got to do our part. If him doing the podcast is a jinx, then, I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, guys are sacrificing all over the place. Guys are diving on the floor. Smart's getting his thumb put back in. Jalen's getting stuff put in his nose. I mean, these guys are sacrificing. Sometimes you got to sacrifice for the greater good, for the team.
Right. I had my hair up in the first half, down in the second half. Looks like we're wearing it down the rest of the way. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is. We all got to make little things. Whether you got to stay on vacation or you got to wear a jumpsuit. Either way.
Yep. We want the duck boats queued, whatever gets us there.
That's right. Brian Barrett, it's been way too long. It's good to have you on here. I can't believe it's the first time we've had you on the show. That's a crime. We got to have you on more. Make sure you follow Barrett on Twitter. It's Brian Barrett. Follow him on WEI. What do you do? What's your schedule looking like coming up here? Let's plug you.
This week I got, let's see, tomorrow I'm on Red Sox Review. Then I got Red Sox pregame Saturday, Sunday, and then I'll be on game 4 Monday night.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be on Monday night after. I'll be on around like 10:30 or so until midnight. So a lot of Celtics reaction after that. I can tell you, Monday night after the Celtics play game 4, I will not be talking Red Sox at all. Right after the Red Sox broadcast, all Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, unless the Sox somehow hit 1 billion home runs and their offense looks like it's back to normal, yeah, I would suggest staying highly Celtics related for all your topics. But we'll see how it goes. Brian Barrett, Evan Valenti, this has been Celtics Beat. Thank you guys for joining us here today. Make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Make sure you subscribe to CLNS Media on YouTube. The response over the past couple of weeks, especially with our post-game show, has been ridiculous. I think the guys last night had 30,000 views in less than 24 hours. That's amazing. So make sure you subscribe to that. Give those guys a shout if you like. Make sure you subscribe to us as well. For Brian Barrett, I'm Evan Valenti. See you guys next time. Game 3 coming Saturday. More waiting, but that's good for the C's. Rest up, Rob. Rest up, Al. Rest everybody else up. We'll see you guys next week. And I'll be back right here on CLNS Media. Celtics Beat. See you guys.